Um, Camila, I actually have a couple of photos that I could share. Um, they're just PDFs, so I can just share them
Cool.
that way if that's okay.
Yeah, I'm going to make you a co-host, and then like that you can share them.
Okay, great.
Okay. So I'm just going to start letting people in. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're going to wait a few minutes to allow people to join the Zoom. Okay, so let's begin. Um, Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being with us um, tonight. This is the 2025 annual poetry reading. And my name is Camilo Otero. I'm the Exhibitions and Publications Manager at Center for Book Arts. Center for Book Arts is the first organization dedicated to supporting and promoting the book arts. We've been around for 50 years, since 1974. And since the beginning, the purpose was um, to give artists, bookmakers, printmakers, and bookbinders a space to work, interact, and learn and showcase their work. And we have maintained and expanded that legacy with our education and exhibitions program, as well as with our collection and reference library and studio access and our residency program. Our reading con poetry chapbook contest has been an annual program for the past 28 years. As part of this reading series, CBA commissions artists to design and produce limited edition chapbooks and broadsides of the competition's winner's manuscript, as well as the judge's manuscript, and two limited edition broadsides of one poem by each runner-up. This year, our guest, Kwame Dawes, selected Laura Kolbe's Keeping House, Six Longer Love Poems, as the winning manuscript, and Carolyn Orosz's Signal Fire, as well as Destiny Brown's Seeded Melon as runners-up. Chapbooks and broadsides are available in our website and at Center for Book Arts, and I'll be posting in the chat the link to the publications. Let me introduce our guest judge tonight. Kwame Dawes is the author of numerous books of poetry and other books of fiction, criticism, and essays. His most recent collection is Sturge Town, published in People Tree Press in the UK in 2023. Dawes is professor of literary arts at Brown University. He teaches in the Pacific MFA program and is the series editor of the African Poetry Book Series, director of the African Poetry Book Fund, and artistic director of the Calabash International Literary Festival. He's a chancellor for the Academy of American Poets and a fellow of the Society of Literature. Kwame Dawes is the winner of the prestigious Wyndham Campbell Award for Poetry and was a finalist for the 2022 Neustadt International Prize for Literature. In 2022, Dawes was awarded the Order of Distinction Commander class by the government of Jamaica. He is the Poet Laureate of Jamaica from 2024 till 2027. As we welcome Kwame Dawes, we are holding Jamaica and its people in our hearts in the aftermath of the recent hurricane. Before I hand it off, I would like to thank our members and funders. This program is supported in part by public funds from the New York State Council on the Arts and the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with City Council. I also want to thank everybody who participated in this year's Poetry Chapbook Contest. Everyone who donated to support this event, and people who bought the broadsides and chapbooks. We encourage you to submit your poetry manuscripts by December 15th for the 2026 Poetry Chapbook Contest. I am now going to hand it off to Kwame. One second. Welcome, Kwame, and thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's good to be here. I'm going to have multiple responsibilities for this evening, but I'm certainly looking forward to hearing these readings. Very honored to be a part of this project that has been, at least in my engagement, has been running for almost a year. And the best thing about it is that it comes up with products. So I don't want to spend too much time ahead of the poets reading their work. So I'm going to introduce each poet. They will read their work. And then I'll just, after the poet has read, then I'll go to the next and go to the next. So we'll be listening to three people today. We have two runners up. So our runner up is Destiny Brown, who will read first, a collection called Seeded Melon. And briefly, I'll do her bio. Destiny Brown therein is an earth worker, writer, and conjurer born in Los Angeles. Destiny uses their craft to grapple with the complex and harsh experiences of living as an Afro-queer femme. Their writing resembles the melodic power of spell work to call forward ecosystems free of intersectional oppression. Their work is centered on collective formation, transformation, disability, oral heritage, weaving, Afro lineage work, spell casting, land memory, and transmuting harm. In 2022, Destiny earned a BA in agroecology with an economics minor from the University of California, Santa Cruz, and they've been featured in a 2004 issue of Pacific Review. Destiny currently enjoys a quiet life in Guerneville, California, with their cat, Gemini. Um, I'll say some brief words about this manuscript. First, a quote from it, a piece called, I think, Ua. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but it's UA. And it's just a little segment. We are not the same, but share a river, sister. Did you put your faith in fear? She wanders to the compost sunflower beaming erect atop a hill. This poet demonstrates great skill and confidence in their language and concepts. There is something urgent and deeply contemporary about a poet who manages to achieve both a lyric manner and tone, even as they effectively create formal moments in which they employ exquisitely strange uses of repetition, song, and fragmentation. So I will ask Destiny Brown to read for us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction. Yeah, so I have two offerings this evening. I'm going to start with the Lost Ones, and then I will follow that poem by reciting Water, which is formerly known as Ua. Yeah, so here's the Lost Ones. I have sunk deep into the warm plush of your fingers. The crinkle of your face when it smiles is a poem. You are my reflection in a labyrinth that never ends. Nestle yourself wholly inside my mouth, slick and soft. You are a sour candy decaying on my tongue, as light as an exhale. Onyx decomposition stains my teeth. It is a saccharine kiss, the haunting of how we became. Like sycamores naked and enchanted in late fall, I wonder what appears in the mirror of the ones I have loved. Do they see the same ice-coated forest exposed like my body beneath a microscope? A lost friend. After a poem by Langston Hughes. Water. We are not the same, but share a river sister. Did you put your faith in fear, she wonders, to the compost sunflower, beaming erect atop a hill. Strawberry Bottom, we run together. They call us dogs, Conrad's sister kin. So we bite together. Water, you are the wind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Beautiful, Destiny. Really appreciate that. So we'll go on to the second poet who'll read for us another runner-up, and that's from a collection called Signal Fire, Carolyn Orosz. I think that's the best pronunciation that I can muster, but hopefully I'll be corrected if I'm wrong. Carolyn Orosz lives and writes in rural Vermont. She received her MFA from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where she was managing editor for the Devil's Lake. Her work has appeared or is forthcoming in 32 poems, Gulf Coast, Copper Nickel, The Journal, Tupelo Quarterly, Nashville Review, Poetry Northwest, Colorado Review, and in other places. She has received support from McDowell Fellowships, the McDowell County McDowell Fellowship, right? Vermont Studio Center, Bread Loaf Writers Conference, and Marble House Project. She's currently a poetry reader for the New England Review. This is from a piece, a longer piece, a chain at some point for this to feel satisfying in a section. I think, it's called I'm Always 12, or it at least begins that way. I want to read it. I think it speaks to what moved me about this work. I'm always 12, always the mariner, some impulse than creature, in the kitchen sink, remnants of an orange squeezed that morning. There's clarity here. It begins with a traumatic moment. Am I doing this right? Oh, right. It begins with a traumatic moment. Um, the death of a father by lightning, even if imagined, and what follows are poems of sharp insight and grace that capture the moment that is beautifully and arrestingly imagined, so that it has tremendous symbolic power. The poet declares they are going back to their childhood to clean up the mess I have made. I'm quoting. It's a premise of great possibility. I love that idea of going back to one's childhood to clean up the mess I have made. It's great. Carolyn Orosz, please read for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm actually going to start with the first poem, and then some of the poems I chose are actually the poems that you quoted, so you'll get to hear them in their full form.
Good.
The first poem is called Acts 9:3. My father was struck by lightning. This was not a dream. I watched him that morning from the bedroom window. It was still almost dark, and they had looked like insects. Fishing poles, antennas, the way they bobbed as the men shifted weight. Screen flapped open a bit, where my brother stuck his foot through the week before. My mother ran out into the street in her underwear. I remember I was ashamed of her small breasts. By the time we had got to the emergency room, someone had given her a towel. They let me in there to touch his arm. They called me princess. There was a pretty lady sitting on his chest. It was vaguely sexual. His eyelids were full of sand. The room was a frenzy, and then it was not. My mother kept him alive so they could harvest his organs. The nurses trimmed his mustache, a haircut every Wednesday. I watched the hair fall. I waited. I washed the soles of his feet, 2 open wounds weeping yellow into bedsheets. My soft blonde head. We received letters. The hospital cast plaster molds of his hands as you might do for a newborn or a well-loved dog. He was so swollen, there were no clear boundaries. I'm going to read from the second poem in the chapbook, which is a longer poem called A Change at Some Point for This to Feel Satisfying. In the dream, I am dancing. I am naked in front of all of these vegetable heads. And I can say vegetable head because my father is there with his swollen, awful body and that brain, which is pulp. My father's feet are leaking pus. I'm watching it when my father should be watching me. And I'm sorry I yelled at you for those little tiny, tiny things that you did. I couldn't help it. It's like I have to. Maybe I'm not allowed to say vegetable head, but I can't help it. It's literally awful inside of me, and I have to say something. I have done everything for my audience with no response. I am 12, peeling muscles off the underside of docks, eyes squeezed shut, bottle in a fist. I am smashing the bundles of shellfish. A muscle opened, then pavement slippery, the color of crayons. Heat wave, alloy orange. I am always 12, always the marina, more impulse than creature. In the kitchen sink, remnants of an orange squeezed that morning. Tilda Swinton is currently sleeping in a box at the MoMA. The piece is called The Maybe. Tilda is sleeping for our viewing pleasure. At the fruit stand, tangerines twist tie fingertips, dipped in paraffin, gleaming in rose, the enhancing of appearance, a consumer preference for shiny fruit. Take off my pants to dance for him in the middle of the room, tuck him in tight like a mummy, Top of his little head peeks out from the blanket. Lift my arms up for him, spin for him, crawl out the open window for him. His eyes warm and wet, expression never changing. Eventually get tired and lay on the floor with my bare legs angled toward the sunlight. The room has 3 windows. Outside, it is mostly winter. It doesn't matter what I do. Everything is warm and bright. Spit becoming so tacky in the mouth that when it moves, it clicks. I am on my knees in that frog light. I am touching myself all over. I have grown breasts. I'll say it again and again. My father is fruit. I watch it yellow drip to the floor. Slow motion experience. I was the problem. The problem had to be solved. The pigeon and its glistening neck. My sister's long fingers, full of rain. I wanted to see what the inside looked like. So here I am, cleaning the frothing wound. And then the next poem I'll read is actually the poem that Liz made the broadside of, so you will see that later on, I assume, or on the website later. And this one's called At the Age of 12, I Started to Notice My Body. Cedar closet, basement, wedding dress. My sister and I used to run around the yard, pretend we were horses. Just like every girl ever, you know, whipping each other bloody with forsythia branches. I was 12. I went to the seaside and brought home a necklace with my name written on a grain of sand. When I came back, it was strange to me. Spit is my favorite fluid. The way it foams a little, trembles in the air before it makes those little fishes come hard and fast. There have been those who've said, that one has a mouth on her. Mostly U.S. history teachers. Girl watched, feels plastic, pitch dark, walking down the street eating string cheese, biking home in wet bikini bottoms. Copper wire, friction, eye contact, moving across a carpet quietly in socks. I collected special stones until each stone became meaningless. I dumped them behind the woodpile. There was a sign there that said, "Come here, we have trees." The area behind the woodpile was full of snakes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah? Okay, thank you very much. That's wonderful. Thank you. So I will introduce the winning collection, and it's titled Keeping House 6 Longer Love Poems, and it's Laura Kolbe is the author of it. Laura Kolbe is a physician and medical ethicist, as well as the author of the poetry collection Little Farmer. Agnes Lynch Starrett Prize, University of Pittsburgh, in 2021. She's recently had poetry and prose in The Atlantic, Conjunctions, Harper's, LARB Quarterly, the New York Review of Books, the New Yorker, the Yale Review, and elsewhere. Her work has been anthologized in the Best American Poetry series and in A World Out of Reach, Dispatches from Life Under Lockdown, Yale University Press. She lives in Brooklyn. Hopefully this, I'm going to quote from a poem called A's Day. And again, it exemplifies what struck me about this work. It was your birthday yesterday, when one is supposed to think about time that the fall holds a meeting with winter and bets the farm again. Singling out the middle of the night, you bristling risk arrived in 1985. We hold hands over stingy drinks in a secretly Midwestern bar, brooding on Atlantic Avenue like a pink bantam chicken. That phrase, a secretly Midwestern bar, is quite lovely. The collection is framed by 4 long love poems named that way, not because they are romantic pieces of romantic love verse, but because they are poems written in a time of love, a time of a love setting, an emotional and mythological space in which human relationships are expressed and explored. The language is insightful and inventive, and the poet shows some delicacy and complexity in these deftly written poems. So I'll invite Laura Kolbe to read her poems. Congrats.
Thank you so much for that generous introduction, and thank you, Camille, and everyone else here. This is really a really special evening, and I'm quite honored. I've become such a huge fan of the Center for Book Arts. You can see behind me is a beautiful broadside by David Trinidad, working with one of the book and broadside artists here, and it's just a marvelous institution, and I feel so privileged to join the family. And I'm so grateful to Becca Josephson. I'm really excited for her to get to talk about her incredible artistry, but this chapbook is gorgeous thanks to her keen aesthetic sensibility and just so much physical labor. So it has turned into this wonderful house, and like any good slightly haunted house, it has lots of nooks and crannies and kind of secret attics and basements in terms of the fold outs and other things that Becca was able to add to it. So I couldn't be more touched and pleased to see my work gain that kind of physicality. So I'm just going to read 3 poems from this chapbook, and I'll read the first one, the title poem called Keeping House. Hard to square how much I wanted with how much requested. The ask and the take like 2 inscribed columns against a pink dawning margin, or the classic rabbit duck illusion hinging on the aimless eye. I was proper, merciful. I wanted the warfarin mouse on the rug to be sleeping only. I watched the train flow by and never once took it. I was becoming a woman like the dead, fond of coins, dreams, cakes, votives, hopeless at adding to my deeds. For a week, I tried keeping forks and spoons in separate drawered slots, but everything that aids you tends toward a similar handle. You accustom to a certain blue enamel, to a few blue inches between you and the slop. When I flushed away my pills to make a baby, cross the red carpet, and tootle at the planetary flash, a recreant hunger rattled me. I sat open-legged at my husband's feet like a splayed magazine and waited, palootle, for one of the 2 ways of keeping book, the rabbit or the duck. Do you see the long haul as velveteen or bill? Of housekeeping and keeping house, which title tells you more of how I did? Anyway, I looked, the neighbor's dog downstairs had a tumor behind one eye, standing out, poached and disabused. The dryer in the basement so stuffed along its hose with skin and thread, we wore our fellow tenants like a beard. The baby wore a trench and specs, slipped back into the crowd. As banister and vinyl siding came undone, so too my pretense to scholarship, my hours at the institutes for tick and talk. So-and-so's drone, Mike angled like a rotting corsage, it all seemed a tale absent the frazzle of seduction. Scheherazade at the fish counter, too behaved with the numbered white tongue of her turn, waiting for the sign to match her slip. One can wait to be swept up for weeks and weeks. Rattling in my carol, how I wanted out to my yellow-sided house, my decadent movement, malady of dreaming. The basement with its gallery of paint cans, the washer-dryer leashed to ghosts and fumes. The good eye, Rufus, desperately twinkling, its confrere blind and bulging like a belly. Years after, dog and banister put or taken down, I still have my domestic arts. I rent and rend and rut. I think of certain animals as the signs for certain years, because there is no actual heir to flesh. Rabbit, duck, or dogfish, any eye could be the volta. Nights when the train veered by, almost and never reaching us, I licked my cornered parts the way a dog would, or a duck parting its plumage to unearth its secret fur-white coney pelt, having always favored the open gloss over being over it. And then since I kindly mentioned it, I'll read A's Day, which is one of the beautiful fold-out details that Becca created. A's Day. It was your birthday yesterday, when one is supposed to think about time that the fall holds a meeting with winter and bets the farm again. Singling out the middle of the night, you, bristling risk, arrived in 1985. We hold hands over stingy drinks in a secretly Midwestern bar, brooding on Atlantic Avenue like a pink bantam chicken. A Scorpio's supposed to be different than me, and that's true. Sometimes I keep a napkin in my coat to be ready to make less of things and handle all the meals and feelings not to be foreseen, while you, love, by contrast, live naked as Yeats said he'd agreed to, but didn't, and the phrases of the moon write their sea steps on your ready hide. You're loyal and you fling, you're like a human dart, you're like a human, heart on the gibbous side. I touch your chin, the same expansive war chest it took, like a cathedral, several generations to make you. Some were dead before they saw the upper stories of your roseate time. It's thin air that we want, the spires with their teal and mystic prayers, and if we're not important, then as fallback to be free. What grows slowly is the single day, even a birthday, while the words are way more jumpy as we wait to find out what is there for our describing. We'll have to say the broken fridge. We'll have to say the warm nights of ragweed. You'll put a sex scene on it, like the pretty frill on top of a BLT. True, it's a major subject, but does it belong everywhere? Fine. Silly are the veils on that valiant erudition, and it's hot when we fuck in our room. And then just one more. Feels fitting that after a sex poem, there is a birth poem, because sometimes those things go hand in hand. And so this is a childbirth poem called Hinge. The door rattles. Blast of pain, and past the pear-white chill of the birth ward bustles this odd shadow down my legs and away. Wet hair styled stiff by the minute's ladle. You are here and growing to the naked eye, new dizzy space in your lungs. Rigging the topsail, nails breadth at a time. Your nails clear and tiny, row of ellipses erased. I knew I'd see my insides on your outsides, how you've been smeared and tossed, like old-time typeset text, like sex. I knew I'd forgive my body telling all, as billions had, and also want forgotten all that spilled ink. Find you neater Genesis than that. A story of a stork. I see why that's been done before. The plausible pinch and pinion when the door swats minutes off like flies, and off you go for the life you spent hours clacking backwards into. Like typeset text. Like new worlds where height flows in one direction only, as time does here on Earth, such that once traversed, that perch can't be chirped on again. Sorry, I'm laughing seeing the subject of this poem on Zoom. There are places you can't go back, even if the site remains, even if the gift of you is storked against the doorstep where we found you in the footpath of an otherwise ordinary Tuesday, the day I took piano lessons as a child, day of learning over and over to loosen my shoulders so the sound came down with greater say over piano or forte, from the whole body's choice and not just its outer limits. You are tuned to a pitch that in this dimension flows just one way, like time, a note that won't be struck again, belonging to an axis of well-tempered fingers, plucking at the air with baited strings. Like typeset text you rattle with the news, or knew at once on arrival that setting nowise binds you, only smears a moment's pigment on a message, changed the more the headline calls for checks of facts, the more it's recounted and columned, pressed into held folds, the more you're here. Thank you, everybody.
Great. I'm unmuted. Good. Thank you. That was fantastic. And it was my pleasure to hear this. Camilla, you're gonna have to help me out here. What happens next?
We open the mic for the artist to talk about their
Like that. Yeah. So
So, well, maybe we can begin with Becca.
Sure. I'll share a few photos.
Second.
Okay. Well, I don't have I just have a couple of things to say, but I um I began this project just by spending a lot of time with Laura's work. And so I was able to just spend a lot of time reading. And when I was reading, I had the feeling of kind of wandering around her home with her and almost stumbling into the poems. And I really wanted to evoke that feeling in the design of the book. And so the structure um, mimics sort of a house shape, but also has some structural elements um, to kind of feel like the reader is wandering around the poems with the narrator, with still holding on to the clarity and format of her work. Um, and so the one, this is the uh, yes, this is the photo of Hinge, which Laura just read. Um, and this is like the stair stepping, or I wanted to, as you're reading the poem, the kind of stair stepping and descending into the poem at the same time you're physically doing that with the fold out um, in this part. And then later on in the second folio section of the chapbook, there's some the pages cut into I don't have the photo of it, but they cut into, or they're cut so I wanted the pages to feel like they're sort of descending on the reader and then ascending again as it takes you back out and you close the book. And then uh, this is the cover of the book, or the front and back cover together. Uh, And I wanted the cover to feel ghostly within the structure of the book. And so the imagery is a cut paper pressure print, and it's printed in a white ink. And the imagery of this follows you into the centerfold of the book. There's that just a little piece of the cover that comes into the centerfold, and then finally the stairs on the inside of the back cover take you out as you close the book. That's all I have. Working with Laura was a really lovely collaboration, and I'm honored to have been able to spend so much time with her and her work.
Thank you, Becca. Now I'm going to move on to Elizabeth Castaldo. Elizabeth designed Carolyn's broadside.
Thank you. I can share an image of the broadside. Oh, maybe. If you want me to share it, I can share it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Okay. Yeah, so this is the broadside that I made for Carolyn's poem, at the age of 12, I started to notice my body. And so I really connected with the imagery of the body and nature in Carolyn's work and her expression of fragility, grief, transformation, and beauty, like throughout her manuscript. And as I read her manuscript, I felt like the imagery was so vivid and there were all these color references that sort of like layered throughout the poems. And I felt like it lingered with me like in a dreamlike way that was really interesting to me. And I tend to like work a lot with layered imagery. And so it just, yeah, I felt like I had a really good connection with her work. And so we spoke about a few poems. We ended up deciding on this one. And I like really wanted to include the entire poem on the broadside. And it was a little bit the way that the spacing is of the lines of the poem in the text makes it a little bit long. And so at first we thought maybe like doing an excerpt, but I really wanted to use the whole poem. So thanks, Carolyn, for letting me get a little creative with the line spacing and the arrangement and everything. So there were some images that definitely resonated with me from the poem, and I really wanted to use colors like yellow, orange, fleshy tones that I was kind of getting from the all of the poems in the book. And so in this broadside, I sort of like picked out like this idea of lace and then like foam of spit to become these textures that make the background. And they're printed over this like really light pink paper. And the lace is from like the Met's archive of like lace images. And then there's this light blue, like bubbly texture that is meant to reference spit. It's actually photos that I took of like soapy bubbles. Um, and those are printed with risograph. And then I have this drawing of the outline of a figure, and the asterisks are all like hand-drawn images that are printed with photopolymer plates. The asterisks in the poem, like in the text, kind of punctuate and like separate each stanza, which I really liked, and it kind of made me think of the stones that are referenced in the poem. And I'm also a collector of stones, like since I was a little kid. So the stones here, which are also Riso printed, are stones that I had in my house that I took pictures of for this. Um, and the forsythias are a lino cut. Forsythias are also a plant that I have like a big connection with from when I was a kid. So I just feel like there were lots of really exciting connections here for me. And I really enjoyed making this a lot. It felt like I was just making my own work and I was getting some new ideas and everything from working with your poetry. So thank you for allowing me to make this broadside.
Thank you, Liz. Eva Parra wasn't able to be with us tonight, but she wanted me to read a few lines. I'm going to share the broadside that she made for Destiny. And can you let me know if you're seeing the broadside? Yeah. Okay, so she says, this piece grew from a long time of sitting with Destiny's poem and with water itself. I kept returning to the image of trying to hold something that won't stay, like running water through your hands. That feeling shaped both the visuals and the way the poem lives on the page. The images come from a quiet experiment of my own body reaching, grasping, and letting go. The poem is fragmented across what looks like film negatives, asking the reader to move slowly, to touch, to look closely, to not take the words all at once. There's a slight delay in access, and that delay is intentional. It mirrors the tenderness and defiance of the poem itself. This broadside is about closeness and distance, about care, about the small friction between control and surrender. It's also about collaboration, trust, and honoring the way a poem can continue to change as it meets another hand. And I am now going to open it to Allison. Allison made the chapbook for our guest judge, Kwame Dawes.
Thank you so much. And it's a delight to be here. I have a couple little slides with visual references that I'll ask Camilo to share. And while he does that, I'll just say, like, it was such an honor to work with Kwame's poetry. I really fell in love with this manuscript, and the getting to meet it so many different times in so many different ways is part of the magic of this process. And so I'm delighted to have had the opportunity to work with his writing in that way. So this is the chapbook, and it's titled Aqueduct, and it stands. It's a concertina with letterpress printed on both sides and silkscreen printed boards. The right reading direction is Kwame's poetry, his manuscript, which speaks for itself, but I have a couple slides to give some insight into how the rest of the design sort of came to be. You can see that on the left is the cover, which is silkscreen printed. A short excerpt of lines from the titular poem, also called Aqueduct, and then a carved stone, which is from Roman aqueduct. And reduplication, transformation, time, and decay reappear and reappear throughout the manuscript. And when I was thinking about making this chapbook, it's, as a poet or someone who is trained in poetry, it is immediately apparent that poems, like artist books, are opportunities for reciprocity in form and content. And the container of a book not only lends mass to the language, but engineers how someone can move through it, how time and attention can move through it. And the hope is also, I guess, that it's capable of delivering the work great distances, which is incidentally also the project of an aqueduct, which is befitting. You can go back to the first one, or the second one. So in every way, I tried to find textual references and justifications for decisions that I was making. In these lines from Aqueduct, there are ruins and ruin, time and transformation, and sculpture and stone and rock. You can go to the next one now. I loved the idea that rocks could be either, they could come to their form either through the product of erosion, something that was sculptured and made a monument that was turned ruin over time, or vice versa, that same rock might be in transit towards becoming a monument, towards becoming something of significance to an individual or to a people. And so I pretty early on, not unlike Liz, kind of settled on finding a way to include rocks or stones in this. But quickly learned in the process that rocks are really complicated, not just geologically or physically, but also politically and spiritually and historically. It started to feel as though any rock that I could personally select for this work, which is so thoughtful, would be oblivious at best and arbitrary at worst. And so I decided to make rocks. On the top left here, you can see in blue, those are with Sumi ink on Mylar paintings that I did and then modified with plaster, with tarlatan, with these kinds of textural fabrics and things that felt really appropriate for the manuscript. And then I photographed them and turned them into the rocks that are on the wrong reading side of the manuscript. On the right-hand side, you can see the only one that I modified to turn it into something different is the rock that sits behind the poem Aqueduct. You can go to the next one. So in addition to this, I'm actually in a very appropriate place. I'm back home in Calgary right now, which gave me the opportunity to go to the Foothills Erratic Train, which is this area right where I grew up that glaciers came and brought rocks with them from rock slides way up in the mountains and deposited them in the middle of fields. And in the same way, I was thinking about aqueducts, but I think I was mostly thinking about glaciers and thinking about time and thinking about the transit of this material well out of its context into something completely different and something completely new. And that top left one is Big Rock, which is in Okotoks, Alberta. The middle one, or the bottom left, is in Calgary, in my hometown. And these are rocks that were sent great distances, not dissimilar from the project of an aqueduct, but with none of the industry, just the strength of water that is frozen, incidentally. So I brought out the book. My mom very gratefully drove me out to the mountains the other day so I could bring it back and have a moment with it in this space, which I think really informed how I was thinking about it, and truly felt like it brought the project together and kind of the labor of putting together a concertina in this format. And yeah, that's how this book came to be. I have a few copies of them here. I have one behind me on the windowsill, and they, I mean, the poetry definitely does speak for itself, but I'm glad to have the opportunity to share some of the justification behind the counter text running underneath.
Camilla is muted.
Thank you, Allison. And now we're gonna listen to Kwame read.
First of all, the seeing what has evolved in the making of the book is tremendous. So thank you, Allison. It's just great. And I know Calgary, so that's great. I didn't know you were up on that side. That's just wonderful. I'm going to read just a few poems from Aqueduct. It's interesting because I think normally when we use the term, when we say aqueduct, we think of um, sort of ancient, cultures in Greek, Greek and Roman cultures and so on. But in my experience, actually, the aqueduct had a historical sort of meaning. But it is interesting that many of the plantations in Jamaica, the slave plantations, the sugar plantations, were developed and engined by the construction of aqueducts, brick aqueducts throughout. And in fact, the high school I went to, Jamaica College, and the university that I went to all have the ruins of 17th century and 18th century aqueducts. And I associate those with colonial Jamaica, plantation Jamaica, and so on. And it doesn't sort of dominate the work, but there's an intimacy because I touched these I sat under these aqueducts, these ruins. We use them to shelter from rain. There's a kind of tactile, lived connection with that physical space. So, in a sense, this is endemic of the kind of things that I try to do with poetry. So, I'll just read some of the first poems in the collection. This is called Monument. At 12, I monumentalized the towers of the past, my primary school, its rounded halls, the hollow, empty classrooms where we did sums, the sweet confusion of first lost power, unspeakable dreams where my new body soured in itself. I entered the dense gully where, grounded in memory, first secrets were made. My body, confounded by dread and need, conjured warm ivory flowers, and falling, I felt the grand release of elation and fear. I declare that we are what we do to memory to find calming peace. I keep retelling this memory. It is not news. For that day the sky blued the more, and slick with grease in that shelter, I blessed it, the holiest of holy spots. The next poem I'll read is Optimism. In deep winter, the sculpting is hidden by the glare of snow, persistent as death. The farmers I hear on the radio are pleased with all this accumulating water. All of this is the promise of miracles, and the riot of dandelions will come first, the earth being soggy for months. The sculpture shapes a body holding a shield like a lute. This is hope, she tells me, hope against what is to come, deep in blistering season. Uccello or Uccello. At dawn, the long-billed stork stands by the reeds, still as a stark lily pod, waiting for the wind to turn. The artist stares, then, as if commanded by spirit, begins the quick flurry of sketching, charcoal and chalk, all sculpted, intentional, statuesque, as if drained of mortality. To create the eternal animal is to create beauty at the end of a century that has destroyed so much. The artist whispers, "You will be my monument against the monstrosities of this city, and you will be the poor relation, the interloper, the immigrant wanderer. You and I who have floated in the reeds for millennia, ignored yet elegantly eternal, in our stark stillness, awaiting the new winds to ruffle as awake." The sitting. I have discarded the fluent imprisonment of fabric. The air is constantly electric with contagion. There I am, my body embracing itself. It's been months and I have forgotten to offer my arms as a mercy to the strangers in my midst. I leave only my eyes to do the labor, to suggest the thin layers of civility. Beneath it all is the wounded self, constantly uncomfortable with the way my garments fit my lumpy body. I'm always waiting, longing to be stripped bare, to be allowed to rest nakedly, seen, but somehow unjudged, as in the liberty of a mirrorless home. The portrait artist tells me to stay still. You will like what I do to you. I can tell always when she's lying. Yet I keep still, draw my breath slowly, allow my skin to imagine the tenderness with which her brush moves over the fabric of my skin, which I know to be a mercy. The knot. Entangled, these limbs are their own grotesquerie, and an eye tries to trace out the lines of desire, where one body becomes another, where desire becomes a knot of accident, knees knocking, shins, lips pressed against teeth, and all tendons stretched, the grunts of accommodations as if slowly a music of rhythms and apologies will transform the entanglement into a fluid flow of labor, each body now familiar with that of its neighbor, as if the wrestling becomes an embrace and a rush to that last arrival, panting, pulsing to a softness, that last breath whispering gratitude into the air. the cocoon of held heat over the bodies. There is an art to this, and that too is more hope than desire, more remembering than dreaming. Landlocked. The lens creates the borders, held at such an angle. The sky never ends. The water remains calm as if a life of deep consolation, and the body, face upward, floats, buoyed by salt and eddies. Breathe, hold, breathe, hold, breathe, hold. For years, I have not been soothed by the endless ocean, its waters lifting and bearing my relaxed body. This hard state is bordered by plains and more plains. I have trembled in this bland space, no interruption, no holy enormity of the unknowable ocean stretching out, or of the loving oppression of the looming hills. I am lost in air, lost in the silence. Breathe, hold, breathe, hold, breathe, hold, breathe. I'll do two more poems. This one is called Bird Rising. The bird in the hand is molded from precious clay. The long-necked bird, whose name I do not know, seems dead, broken, its wings stiffened. And yet I know that come the first rain of the season of storm, it will shudder, look quizzically at the open hand, and then take flight. First, there is the air, and then there is the life. So I'll end with a piece called Claw. I should say that most of these poems had no home because they came from a response to the work of a remarkable Iranian artist whose work I found in this wonderful book of his art. And I wrote the poems in response to it, as is my want. So I'm glad that the book that it's coming found a home in is a book that is about a kind of sculpting, that book art as a sculpting, as a creating of a space for it. And so this piece, Claw, is a response to a sculpting, a piece of sculpture of a hand in quite a dramatic hand. So I'll read the poem. Claw. A giant claw has grown overnight, as if some aborted nightmare is remaking my body. I awake with a perfectly functional, though over-heavy claw, the side of my torso protruding from my ribs. This is the weight I carry around all day, and even strangers long to touch it. They ask politely, though I can see it in their eyes, the pity and the fear. The rest of me is shrinking away, as if all nutrients have migrated to the place where the rib meets claw. Someone whispers that now I have the power, and the claw is my weapon, the thing that protects me. What I write with my good hand is this: I am mourning the death of love, not a lover's, but my sister's death, her absence, and none of this makes sense. The glass is gleaming with salt and water. It smells like blood, they say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kwame. At this point, I would like to open the possibility for anyone who would like to ask a question or make comments or share ideas about the reading. We have about 10 minutes, so if anyone wants to share something or ask, please go ahead.
I'm curious, what is the most challenging physical step for the people who made these books? Like, what's the most technically difficult or challenging thing to accomplish?
Say for concertina, it's the asymmetrical math, because the pages, there's a midline right where they're folded, but you need something that you can fold over to adhere the pages together. So doing a bit of asymmetrical math to ensure that all the titles still end up centered on the page, is probably the most laborious. And then I would say folding those things, so that the block itself of folded pages that are all interlocked don't go slanted. That's probably the most labor intensive part.
I also was doing a lot of triangle math, so I think the triangle math was because if it's not right, then they're not gonna line up. So same thing. But all of there's all right here. So also just putting them together. It's just a lot of.
Hi everyone. I am off camera. I'm sorry. I have a baby. So I won't turn my camera on, but I just want to thank you all so much for your beautiful reading and work. It's really so inspiring. And I am someone who writes poetry and loves poetry. And I think, and I've only been working at CBA for about a year, and it's absolutely opened up a new world for me to see just this beautiful, thoughtful, nuanced approach to making these chapbooks and broadsides, and just how much they honor the poetry, and also create the space for the artists to, make their own discoveries and expressions. And it's just so beautiful, the vulnerability that you all have brought to this process of sharing such moving writing and works, and then having the trust to have these artists take it into their own hands and create something so beautiful that doesn't, in my kind of humble opinion, just kind of dances with the poetry so beautifully, and doesn't kind of interrupt or interfere with it, but just like speaks to and with and from it in such a gorgeous way. So thank you all so much for sharing what you do.
Yes, I also have a question. It's also for the artists who interacted with the poets through these publications. Like, how do you approach the project? I've heard individual stories, but I feel like it's a big challenge not to let the poems speak and enhance them and not, like overstep at some point. I remember Liz mentioning that she was thankful because she was able to get a little creative with the layout. And I know that with Destiny, there was also an interaction about the line breaks and the placing of the words. So yeah, I'd like to hear from both sides, from poets and from the artists, how this maybe negotiation or conversation happens, or how it happened in this case.
I'll say at one point, so the length of Aqueduct, the titular poem, is so long that there was no, without doing some folding letterpress printed pages and producing some form of like engineered way of presenting it, which really felt like at that point over-engineered for the content. The only real solution was to split it into parts. And so Kwame very gratefully split it into 3 parts. And that's still, I was still pushing it. And so I sent an email asking, is there any way, and feel free to say no, is there any way it can be split into 4 parts? And he responded within, I think, 30 minutes saying, anything is possible in poetry. And summarily split it into 4 parts so that I could make that work. And that kind of reciprocity, like that was, I was so grateful for that, because I think that it kept the flow of the whole thing. It allowed it to breathe in a very elegant way and to exist in an elegant way without trying to jam the content into the form. The container then was able to expand and contract to contain it. And Kwame's approach to that, I was so grateful for. And anything is possible in poetry is something that I have to remind myself of often. So I was grateful for that also.
What I can say is, Laura, I don't know how it was on, I'd love to hear how it was on your end as well, but I think that going in feeling like anything is possible is a little bit overwhelming. So to start with like the poems, let's see if the poems can stay together and still uh, communicate the design that I had coming to mind, I think was actually a nice place to start, just to give it like a little bit of restriction. And then the things that felt like the form could expand maybe or change a little bit to add those in afterwards. The poems being able to do that is nice, but to start with like, can the lines stay as they are is kind of relieving.
Yeah, I feel like the the poems were so liberated and enlarged by some of Becca's choices. Choices that she always framed as sort of asking permission. And with every time I was like, oh my God, like obviously this is so much better than the sort of straightforward way that I had typographically arranged these things, because I don't think visually in the same way that Becca does, but I think things like taking the sort of coda of a poem or its kind of final stretch and displacing it to the next page so that the eye just so the reader kind of takes a deep breath and takes a leap as though kind of across a chasm, is just such a wonderful, invigorating experience. And for me, reading these poems in the way that you have set them on the page really like alters them in the most lovely way, where they are still themselves, but with more air and somehow kind of more gusto. So it's really incredible when someone sees your work for what it is and then somehow enhances without deforming. I feel like that's a very graceful and kind and attentive gesture.
We have a question here from Janae Brown.
Yes. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. I am so honored to be here tonight. I am the mother, proud mother of Destiny Brown. And my question is for all of the poets. Anyone could answer. In your poems, you balance emotional honesty with such precise language. So was there a moment in the writing or revision process when the poem surprised you or shifted into something that you didn't expect?
I think for me, the best part of writing a poem is that it should always surprise me by the end of it. And in the poem at the age of 12 that Liz did for the broadside, that was a whole act of collaging images together from a very particular memory or a couple weeks in my life. And I think that putting images in juxtaposition with each other taught me a lot about where the poem was going emotionally. And I think it was interesting to see the broadside because it had also collaged things in kind of a similar way. And so I always find the surprise in sort of the juxtaposition between images.
I am always interested in this idea of I think poems surprise me when I read them years later, or you know, and then I go, did you really say that? Like, why would you do that? And that I don't think I can plan for. I think the word surprise is fascinating to me because I tend to think of surprise as surprising, as against, oh, wow, that's interesting. And I think that's more I think surprise is so strong a word. But I find it curious that as teachers, I keep telling students, you should let your work surprise you. I don't know why I tell them that, because if they're writing the work, how does the work surprise them, and how do you plan to be surprised? Like, how do you make yourself be surprised? That seems almost impossible. But I keep telling them to do that, and I don't know. I'm now thinking about that and thinking maybe I'll stop doing that. Um, which maybe doesn't answer your question, but there we go.
Well, is there any other idea, question, comment? If not, I'd like to thank all of you for being here tonight and for your commitment to poetry and book arts and yeah, sharing all these beautiful thoughts and and life with us. So I'd also like to mention, I know we're a few amount of people, but this will also be on YouTube for other folks to see, that our 2026 poetry chapbook contest is open until December 15th. And we're excited to see what happens next year. Thank you all very much, and wishing you a good night.